and questions, and we'll make sure to cover them. If you're watching this offline, feel free to contact us. The topic is noticing, right? Where is the most important use of noticing and a new skill of noticing in our lives? And we've taken a look this summer more closely about, what do people care about a lot these days, and kind of what's going on. And we expected to find all kinds of different things, right? People, dealing with, job changes, or people dealing with, a whole variety of different things. But what we didn't expect to find is that so many people are dealing with stress, and stress in our daily lives, and effects, sometimes hidden effects of stress. So this is how we came up with the idea to talk about noticing, because it's a great tool to use to figure out where the stress is coming from and what is it, and how to deal with it, and all of that. And it's a skill, right? So it's not a concept, right? We want to talk about noticing as a skill to notice. We went back and asked a few of our teachers about stress in general, and then about some of the first things that one can do about stress. And then we went and talked to folks in the community. There's about 150 people now that are in and around Upend, and we did a survey, and we did all kinds of fun, interesting things at these happy hours. Talking to people and like that, kind of just building out the community slowly and gently. And we realized one new thing. And the new thing is that there seems to be a new variant, if you will, of stress going around. And it only started in the last couple of years, coincided with COVID. And then, all joking aside, we've just all been just hammered, one thing after the other, right? With COVID, with elections, and January 6th, and Ukraine, and COVID again, and COVID again, and COVID again, with George Floyd murder and protests, and everything that happened there, unrest in the country. I mentioned Ukraine war, just a whole variety of different things: shootings, school shootings, church shootings, religious place shootings, just not great stuff. And what a lot of people have noticed is that whatever skills we all had, right? I had skills to deal with stress, right? I've been dealing with stress my whole life, right? But I kind of, there's stress in my life, and then there's the skills that I use to deal with stress, and they kind of match, right? Sometimes stress wins, sometimes, I keep it under control, but it wasn't a thing to talk about. Like, yeah, there's stress, and you just deal with it, and that's that. Simple skills, right? For me, exercise, right? Running, being out in nature, things like that, meditation. For many other people, many different things, right? Seeing a good funny movie, or whatever it is, right? Hanging out with friends. But what we've noticed, certainly my friend group and around my family, is those kinds of skills that we used to have to deal with the old stress are not as effective against the new stress. So we call the new stress 10x stress, right? Because it's 10 times stronger than what we used to have, and it's sustained. So neuroscience tells us, when we look at these meta studies, or studies that look at a bunch of other studies, and look at animal studies and MRI images and all of that, the people notice that, scientists notice that stress actually grows the area of the amygdala, which is in our kind of in the center of our head, almond-shaped part of the brain responsible for emotion, and it shrinks the hippocampus part of our brain in the limbic system, and it shrinks the prefrontal cortex. So, for people or for animals who were exposed to sustained severe or moderate stress. So what does that mean? Well, we've certainly had periods of severe and moderate stress over the last 2 years. It's certainly been sustained, right? We've not gotten a break. So I'm not saying that parts of our brains shrunk and grew, but certainly there's enough science there that people have been publishing papers about this, and there's something to take a look at. So the question is, okay, fine, here it is. Let's just agree that the color, flavor, shape, and size of the stress that's showing up these days in our lives is very different than what we used to see, and perhaps is overwhelming our defenses. So, okay, great. Now what? The traditional thing to do is to like take some action, right? To like just go do something. But the invitation from ancient wisdoms and the invitation from indigenous wisdoms and the invitation from our teachers is to not, right? Don't go do something. First, notice. So what's there to notice, right? So this is kind of the new skill of noticing, is to look and pay attention to things that are in our surroundings that we're not aware of. Are there new stressors in our lives that we didn't have before? Right? I'll tell you one new stressor in my life is a little baby addiction. I started with COVID and the last elections is checking the news first thing in the morning. Right? I never used to. I didn't even turn on my phone until basically I was ready to go to work. But then somehow during COVID and during the elections, I was just glued to the phone in the morning. And even when I got it down to just a few minutes, it's like it was starting the day on the wrong foot. Like just filled my head with just not great stuff, right? Just anxiety and stress and just bad news after bad news, right? And then of course you check the election, but you also are checking, whatever, what else is in the news and what else is in the news. As you know, algorithms for most of us, for me, for sure, just bring up bad news, and I think news organizations know, right? What bleeds leads. So that was, for example, a new habit that I developed that I didn't have before. And that new habit really affected my daily quality of life, but I didn't notice it, right? It snuck in. It wasn't like one morning I decided, okay, I'm gonna do this. But what I did notice is, sleep was going down. I noticed changes in my body. I noticed I was just edgier. So when I dug in and said, okay, what could be going? What am I doing different? What am I doing? I'm not doing anything different with food or exercise or work. What am I doing different? So it was the noticing that brought me to that awareness, right? And then I can take action, right? Then I know what I'm doing. So rather than doing more of the same old tools, like exercising more or meditating more or whatever more, it was actually needing to do something different. But that something different couldn't have been done without noticing. One thing that neuroscience tells us about noticing new things is that when you notice new things, new pathways form in your brain, right? It's if you keep looking and noticing the same thing that's around you, brain kind of ignores it, right? It deletes it. There's this fun thing called a signal in the brain called a P300, and P means it's a positive wave, and 300 means it's 300 milliseconds. And if you measure the brain electrical activity, if you play sounds in the ear, and you go beep, 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 doo, beep, 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 like that. But the toot sound, that's the only time that P300 recognized something. So the rest of the sounds, because they were the same, the brain ignored them. Literally, there's no change in the signal. But when there's a change in the signal, it could be change in frequency, change in tone, change in amplitude, change in whatever, some change, the brain recognizes it. So different neural circuitry lights up when we notice something different, right? Our brain notices something different, and then we can train ourselves to notice something different. So that's the new science and neuroscience. Actually, the P300 was invented was found or first recorded by a good friend of mine and former mentor, was a professor at NYU, Dr. Roy John. I worked with him for many years and learned that from him. And then neuroscience has shown us since then, and with scanning electron microscopes and everything else, that there's a lot to be said about noticing something new. Right now, we talked also in the last couple of weeks with Dr. Ray Blanchard, who's one of the teachers at Upend. And he's a psychologist and philosopher, has a PhD in philosophy, and a very spiritual person. And he talked to us about a different kind of noticing. And I love his formula because it's so simple and it doesn't require any effort, right? So the formula is very simple. It only has 3 parts, right? Part 1 is from Dr. Ray Blanchard. Part 1 is notice something you've never noticed before. Right? Now, that doesn't mean you have to go to some other country or go to some weird place in nature or anything like that. No, like literally in your actual daily life. If you're just walking down the street or even in your house, train yourself slowly to notice something that you've never noticed before, right? I noticed an old motion sensor from an old alarm system that's in the house that we live in, that we took out all the old alarm system stuff. This one was just sitting here in the office. And it's not really that relevant what you notice. It's just that you're training yourself in the skill of noticing. So that skill of noticing is training our antenna, training our systems to see new things like that. So that's part one, notice something you've never noticed before. Part two is let it go. So this one was totally counterintuitive to me. And I just didn't get it for a while, I have to say. Why would I let it go? If I noticed it, then it's important. Shouldn't I try to memorize it or try to remember it? And no, part of letting go is trusting our systems, right? Trusting our brains, trusting our nervous system, but also trusting our body to learn from that noticing by itself in the way it learns really important stuff. Right? So trusting our body and giving it time to absorb, filter, process, and store the information. Now, of course, we all know that we store information in our brains, right? We have the memory, but we also have muscle memory, right? Those of you, runners or bikers or work out or play any sport, about muscle memory. But also remember, our DNA stores stuff. This is how we learn from generation to generation, right? I was born with the DNA from my parents. And then between that time and the time I had kids, whatever I learned that was really important got embedded into my DNA and got passed to my kids. And then it'll be with their DNA going forward. So somehow, without us consciously thinking about it, I mean, did something ever happen to you and say, oh, I know, I need to encode this in my DNA? I mean, we don't do that, right? Not consciously, but it does happen. So part of that, notice something you've never noticed before, and then let it go, is the trusting of the system, that the system is going to store the information, however it does it in the memory cells in our brain, in our nervous system, in our bodies, in our proteins, in our DNA, wherever, however it happens, whole different discussion. But the system is going to figure out what's important and then put some of these things together, and then we'll kind of know what to do, right? So we'll generate some options. So that's part one, notice something you've never noticed before. Part two, let it go. Part three, notice something else. Very simple formula you can do on the way to work, while you're taking a shower, whatever it is wherever it is that you have a moment to just remind yourself. And that's how you build the skill, right? That's how you build the skill of noticing. And then that skill of noticing, which just takes a few weeks, right? This is not 10 years on the mountain. It's not like a day, right? You can't really get it done in a day, but every time I go back and refresh this skill, it just takes a few weeks, and then I can just see that I'm noticing emotions, my own and people around me. I'm noticing, my kids better. I'm noticing kind of what mood or what space my wife is in better, and I can just be more effective, and frankly bring down that stress, right? Bring down that stress. The other thing to notice about stress is the source of it. One of the things that was interesting to me in COVID is really to pay attention, not just COVID, but the whole barrage of unfortunate events that we've had, unhappy events, is to notice how much of it is external, right, coming at me. The stuff in the news, or some changes at work. There were challenging clients, right? Stuff that I don't really have much control over, but it does impact my life. Versus the internally generated stress that comes from kind of me asking questions and being unsettled and uneasy about, am I good enough? Am I a good enough father? Am I a good enough husband? Am I doing the right thing? There's huge changes in the world. Should we be buying something or selling something or changing jobs? What should we be doing? This kind of internal swirling of thoughts that, again, prior to COVID, I didn't have. I did years ago, but not really, kind of a few years prior to COVID. I just focused on family and work, and wasn't really questioning myself this much. Like, why am I even here? What am I doing? Like that. So it was really important for me to distinguish kind of the external sources of stress, and then one set of strategies to deal with those versus the internal sources. But I didn't know the difference. So that's why the skill of noticing was so important, because all of it just showed up as some kind of anxiety and background worry, right? So I knew the symptoms, right? Sleep not going so great, kind of edgy, tired, blah, 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 right? All the standard stuff that we see with stress, and many of us seeing a lot more of it now than we did before. So I kind of didn't have a good correlation between the symptoms and the causes. And it's a skill of noticing that's subtle, right? It's a subtle skill of noticing that ended up being extremely helpful, and the one I wanted to share, and the one that we recorded some videos with Charity Martin, one of our other teachers who talks about embodiment, also going into our body to notice, to ask the body what it's noticing, incredible source of information. And then Dr. Ray Blanchard, who talked about noticing. You can see this on the website. And then I wanted a completely different perspective. So I asked one of our Indigenous women teachers, Patricia James, just that question. We did a little interview, and I just asked, like, okay, talk to us about noticing, right? She's in addition to her own training as a Cheyenne medicine woman and pipe carrier and priest, she's also been a cross-cultural wisdom student, if you will, for many, many years, and knows a variety of different traditions around the world. So I asked her, like, okay, in your own tradition and in your own practices and from other people's practices that you're allowed to share, what can you tell us about noticing? And it was amazing that the feedback she gave us was very similar to what we heard from Charity about the embodiment, and from Dr. Ray Blanchard about kind of noticing in our life. And the idea is almost the same, right? From completely two different schools of thought, which is what we see time and time again at Appen, right? Which is why we're excited to share this. Is we talked about stress and kind of what are the tools for stress, and the first one was to notice. And to notice what's happening around us, but also to go in, like, to be in nature a bit and notice how nature works. Right? It's always great Indigenous teachings that always bring the reminder of nature, right? Be in nature and see how Mother Nature makes things work, right? See the kind of the peace and quiet that's in the forest, right? See the ecosystem at work, right? See the abundance, right? The richness. See that there's no effort per se, right? No visible, like the tree is not sitting there going, right? The flower is not sitting there going, I gotta bloom, I gotta bloom, I gotta bloom. I bloom, right? It doesn't really do that. At least it's not obvious to us. It just kind of sits there and blooms. The birds come and go and all of that. So her idea was, one, spend time in nature, and two, just notice what shows up around you. And what I like the most is, as you're noticing what shows up around you, notice if there's some patterns. So if birds show up on your walk, okay, interesting. Which birds? And is there one or two particular kinds of birds? Let's say one type of bird, maybe even the same one, the same actual bird. Do they keep showing up over and over and over again? And if they do, then study it, right? See what's there, right? See, what does it mean? Is this just totally random? Just this bird just comes like this? Or is there something more there than something being totally random, right? And a number of people who are in the various spiritual traditions don't think that we live in a kind of a random mechanical universe where things just happen kind of based on probabilities, but that there may be some more meaning to the life behind us. So we're not obviously promoting one or the other, the third view of the world, but I do think it's interesting to see the similarities and distinctions between what the various teachers have been saying. So there you have it. If you're live, submit any questions you have, or if it's after the fact, if you're watching this as a recording, please email us at feedback@appen.com, and we'll be happy to answer questions and engage and discuss. So there you have it. That's it for today. Keep it light and easy for this Friday afternoon before we go into the weekend. The skill of noticing and how to use it to find stressors in your life, and then eventually to make friends with them. All right, that's it. We'll call it a day. Thank you and goodbye.